Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Create and Consume, a podcast about what we make, watch, and buy in the era of digital content. I'm your host, Austen Tosone. So, first of all, welcome back. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. I am really looking forward to this year. And one of the reasons I'm looking forward to this year so much is because last year I feel like I really got back into my reading rhythm after being out of it for several years, in part due to, the pandemic and also just my changing habits and my slight phone addiction that we all probably have. So I talk more about tips and best practices for how I got back into reading in my episode from last year called In My Reading Era, if you want to give that a listen. But today I wanted to share what is on my TBR or my to be read list for 2025. I did manage to read 21 books in 2024, and I'm really proud of that. I'm hoping to read at least the same amount, if not more. I mean, this list is already longer than 20 books, but you know what? That's okay. And I obviously might not get around to reading everything. There might be new releases that pop up that I wasn't initially aware of, but basically, I want to reveal what was left over from my 2024 TBR and also share what new 2025 releases are going to be coming out this year that I'm really looking forward to checking out as soon as they are published to give you some ideas and inspiration for what you might want to pick up this year as well. Before we review this list, let's do a little create and consume. And I am pre recording this episode just so I can take some real time off during the holidays. So I know future me is going to be thrilled when this episode airs on January 2nd, and I recorded it well in advance. So, what I'm creating this week, you may have seen already, but I put out a vlog on YouTube that I'm really proud of where I showed you the exact process for how to create a vision board. So, if you're ready to dive into all of the visions and manifestations and all that fun stuff for 2025, and you're looking for a little real world activity to do to really start to visualize what you want your dream year to look like, this is a great YouTube video to check out. I will link it in the show notes or in the description box if you are watching this episode on YouTube. And I basically showed you exactly how I create a vision board from start to finish. And I also shared some prompts and questions that I ask myself before I start looking for imagery to make sure that I'm finding imagery that reflects what I really want in the coming year. So I have those prompts available for you to download as well. I can link those below too. And I'm just really proud and happy with how this video turned out. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, that is a great top of the year YouTube video to check out. And as far as what I'm consuming this week, I just finished my 21st book of 2024, which was unexpected, but we had book club a few weeks ago, and my friend Lauren lent me this book. And I actually flew right through it. I read this book in 4 days. I was not expecting to do so, but it was just such an easy page turner read. So I definitely wanted to shout it out. The book was called Primetime Romance by Kate Robb. And this book follows Bryn, who is 30, newly divorced, living with a roommate to pay off her townhouse in Toronto. And on the eve of her birthday, she is home and watching her comfort early 2000s show called Carson's Cove, which, if you are a Dawson's Creek fan, basically just picture that. It's very similar. And her roommate, Josh, who is her brother's friend, who's a bartender, is on the couch with her, and she gets a mysterious birthday cake delivery from Uber Eats. They have some of the cake, they fall asleep, and when they wake up, they are not in the townhouse in Toronto. They are in Carson's Cove, and they're in the TV show. There's a whole thing about how the show was kind of canceled before the two main characters could get together and declare their love for one another. So now that they are kind of stuck there, Bryn and Josh assume these different characters. Bryn is the romantic lead, and Josh is kind of the outsidery, gruff bartender who doesn't really have too many connections to people in the town. And they basically have to figure out how to get their characters new happy endings. And of course, since they got sucked into, whatever dimension this is, and they're not both dreaming, they bond in some ways that they weren't expecting. So I really loved this one. Like I said, I just flew through it. I had a really fun time reading it, and especially thinking about how all of these things tie back into a show like Dawson's Creek. So if you're a fan of the early 2000s shows, or you're looking for a quick and easy rom-com, this one was really fun. With that all squared away, let's move on to what was left over on my TBR from 2024. So for each one of these, I'll tell you the name of the book, the author, what year it came out, and why I'm interested in reading it, or basically like how I found out about it. And the reason I also want to give you guys the years is because I read a lot of books this year from my library, and one of the best ways to get books from the library was to read not necessarily like the newest, most popular releases, but to put in requests for books that came out a few years ago. So if you prefer to get books from the library and you don't necessarily want to buy every single book brand new, the first few ones on this list will be from within the last like 3 years for the most part. So I think you'll have an easier time requesting those and getting copies of them. The first book on my TBR is called Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This book came out in 2021, and they are currently in the process of turning it into a movie. So there is a film coming out in 2026. Now, I have heard Olivia Mentor on the Bad on Paper podcast talk about this book ad nauseum, and I've heard a lot of the Bad on Paper listeners say in the Facebook group that they have for the podcast that this was one of their best books of the year. So the plot is very Interstellar adjacent and not really something I would typically go for, but I'll read you a quick little synopsis. Ryland Grace is the sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission. If he fails, humanity and the Earth itself will perish. Oh, good. Except that right now he doesn't know that. He can't even remember his own name, let alone the nature of his assignment or how to complete it. All he knows is that he's been asleep for a very, very long time, and he's just awakened to find himself millions of miles from home. So again, I'm immediately thinking of Interstellar when I read this plot. He's kind of the last chance. That's why I'm assuming the book is called Project Hail Mary. And I've just heard nothing but good things about this one. And obviously, if you want to get in early and read this book now before all of the film buzz starts in 2026, that might be a good one to add to the list. And I also have that book because my mom bought it and lent it to me. So it's actually on the shelf right down there somewhere behind me if you're watching on YouTube. And the same goes for this next book. My mom purchased this book and read it, and she gave me her copy. So it is also right there on the bookshelf, and it's on my list. This book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and this book came out in 2022. The setup for this one is on a bitter cold day in the December of his junior year at Harvard, Sam exits a subway car and, amidst the hordes of people waiting on the platform, sees Sadie. He calls her name. For a moment, she pretends she hasn't heard him, but then she turns and a game begins, a legendary collaboration that will launch them to stardom. These friends, since childhood, borrow money, beg favors, and before even graduating, they have created their first big blockbuster, Ichigo, I hope. Overnight, the world is theirs. Not even 25 years old, Sam and Sadie are brilliant, successful, and rich, but these qualities won't protect them from their own creative ambitions or the betrayals of their hearts. So it's about two friends who get together and create a video game. And I mean, the setup to me, just from reading this paragraph, is giving a little bit like Facebook social network vibes. I don't know if that is really right or not, but I mean, just the Harvard grads getting together and creating like a new life-changing product sounds kind of familiar to me. So I definitely have this one on my list. It has appeared on, the top books of the year lists numerous times that I've seen. Next up is a book called This Time Tomorrow. The author is Emma Straub, and she actually owns a bookstore in Brooklyn that I feel like I've been in once, but I would love to go back to this year, which is Books Are Magic, and this novel came out in 2022. The description for this book reads, "On the eve of her 40th birthday, Alice's life isn't terrible." We love to hear that. She likes her job, even if it isn't exactly the one that she expected. She's happy with her apartment, her romantic status, her independence, and she adores her lifelong best friend. But her father is ailing, and it feels to her as if something is missing. When she wakes up the next morning, she finds herself back in 1996, reliving her 16th birthday. But it isn't just her adolescent body that shocks her, or seeing her high school crush. It's her dad, the vital, charming 40-something version of her father with whom she is reunited. Now armed with a new perspective on her own life and his, some past events could take on new meaning. Is there anything that she would change if she could? This reminds me kind of the setup of, I think it's a book, but it might have also been a movie, The Sliding Doors, like what happens when a person gets on a certain subway car versus when they don't, and how the two different like sides of the story kind of pan out. I think that one is really interesting. Obviously, I think it deals with the topics of family and relationships and just the topic of regret or thinking back on what you would change in your life if you could. So, this one, again, I've heard the writing is just really beautiful and it sounds like a super interesting story, kind of different from what I feel like I normally gravitate towards. So, this one is definitely on my TBR for this year. Next up is The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hildebrandt. This one came out in 2023, and once again, my mom bought it and gave it to me, so it is on the bookshelf right there. And I have now read 2 Ellen Hildebrandt books. I've read Winter Street, which I really loved. We read that one for book club at the end of 2023, I want to say. And then we did read The Perfect Couple in September of 2024 for book club. I definitely preferred Winter Street. I liked The Perfect Couple okay, but I wasn't really satisfied with the ending. But I like an Ellen book because of the multi POVs when she does them and because of how easy it is to read them. Here's a description of The 5-Star Weekend. Hollis Shaw's life seems picture perfect. She's the creator of a popular food blog, Hungry with Hollis. Oh, I love it already. And she is married to Matthew, a dreamy heart surgeon. But after she and Matthew get in a heated argument one snowy morning, he leaves for the airport and is killed in a car accident. The cracks in Hollis's perfect life and her strained marriage and her complicated relationship with her daughter Caroline grow deeper. So when Hollis hears about something called a 5-star weekend, one woman organizes a trip for her best friend from each phase of her life, her teenage years, her 20s, 30s, and midlife, and decides to host her own 5-star weekend on Nantucket. But the weekend doesn't turn out to be a joyful Hallmark movie. We've got food blogging, we've got complicated relationship dynamics, and we've got Nantucket. I mean, I definitely have this one on my TBR for a reason. Next up is Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This one came out in 2023, and same thing. My mom bought this one, read it, and gave it to me to read next. And I'm just so lucky to have a mom who A, loves buying books, and B, has similar taste to me and shares the books that she's reading with me the same way I try to do with her too. So the plot for Good Material is Andy loves Jen. Jen loved Andy, and he can't work out why she stopped. Now he is without a home, waiting for his stand-up career to take off, and wondering why everyone else around him seems to have grown up while he wasn't looking. Set adrift on the sea of heartbreak, Andy clings on to the idea of solving the puzzle of his ruined relationship, because if he can find the answer to that, then maybe Jen can find her way back to him. But Andy still has a lot to learn, not least his ex-girlfriend's side of the story. I mean, the stand-up world, when I think about that, I immediately kind of reference back to The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I loved that plot setup, especially how she was kind of using her relationship with her husband as material for her sketches and how it kind of launched, her career in the show. So I really liked that storyline and that setup. So I'm interested to see how this one pans out as well. It also sounds a little bit like romantic comedy to me, which was a Curtis Sittenfeld book. I think it came out in 2022 that I read, where basically a celebrity came in to guest host like an episode of SNL, and the writer that was teamed up with him to do the sketch and everything kind of had this banter and stuff. I would definitely recommend romantic comedy. If you didn't read that, I read that in 2023 and it was one of my favorite reads of the year. Okay, next up is Anita DeMonte Laughs Last by Sotil Gonzalez. And this was a Bad on Paper book club pick from 2024, I think. That is the year the book came out. Yes, so that would make sense. And the premise is in 1985, Anita DeMonte, a rising star in the art world, is found dead in New York City. Her tragic death is the talk of the town until it isn't. By 1998, Anita's name has been all but forgotten. Certainly by the time Raquel, a third-year art history student, is preparing for her final thesis. On College Hill, surrounded by privileged students whose futures are already paved out for them, Raquel feels like an outsider. but when she becomes romantically involved with a well-connected older art student, she finds herself unexpectedly rising up in the social ranks. As she attempts to straddle both worlds, she stumbles upon Anita's story, raising questions about the dynamics of her own relationship, which eerily mirrors that of the forgotten artist. In 2024, I read The Cloisters, which took place at the Cloisters, as you can probably guess from the title, which is the satellite museum of the Met Museum that is all the way up on 190th Street in Manhattan. And it's basically this like reconstructed beautiful castle with a lot of medieval art. I was an art history major, if you didn't know, so that is what initially drew me to the Cloisters, and that's also why I thought this story would be really cool to read as well. Next on my list is a nonfiction read. It's called Cue the Sun: The Invention of Reality TV by Emily Nussbaum, and it came out in 2024. So Emily Nussbaum is a staff writer for The New Yorker, and she is also a critic. Who invented reality TV, the world's most dangerous pop culture genre, and why can't we look away from it? In this revelatory, deeply rooted account of the rise of dirty documentary, Emily Nussbaum unearths the surprising origin story of the genre that ate the world, as told through the lively voices of the people who created it. At once gimlet-eyed and empathetic, Cue the Sun explores the morally charged, funny, and sometimes tragic consequences of the hunt for something real inside something fake. As you guys know, I watch a lot of reality TV, but one of my favorite things about reality television is the conversations surrounding it and the critics and commentators who add their perspective and their thoughts to this existing catalog of work, kind of constantly trying to figure out if what we're being shown is real or fabricated, how much manipulation or involvement producers tend to have in TV shows like this. And even though I know the early days of like the 1990s TV world with The Real World and Survivor and competition shows like that, this book seems to predate all of that stuff. And I'm really interested in just reading up on like the history of this genre of media that I consume pretty heavily. So I asked Andrew for this book for Christmas, so I assume that I have it in my hands by the time you are listening to this episode. And I'm super excited to dive into this one. For me, I've realized over the years too that if I'm going to read a nonfiction book, it has to be a topic that I'm truly, truly interested in. And I am done forcing myself to try to read books just to make me feel smarter. Like, I still want to read history and memoirs and things like that. But I don't really feel the need to read a book just because someone thinks it's impressive or because I feel like it would make me look smarter. So if you've been struggling with that at all, I talk a little bit more about that in the reading episode that I mentioned earlier, but just something to think about as you curate your TBRs for 2025. And on a similar topic, I do have another nonfiction read on this list. It is called Extremely Online: The Untold Story of Fame, Influence, and Power on the Internet by Taylor Lorenz. And this also came out in 2024. Taylor Lorenz is an extremely established culture reporter. She has written for the New York Times, The Atlantic, but most recently she has left traditional media to start User Mag, which is her Substack and user-supported publication. She is fully an independent journalist now, and she talks a lot about why she decided to kind of make that change from traditional journalism to being a self-employed journalist at this point in her newsletter, but she did write this book last year. The description for this one reads, "By tracing how the internet has changed, what we want, and how we go about getting it, Lorenz unearths how social platforms' power users radically altered our expectations of content, connection, purchasing, and power." Lorenz documents how moms who started blogging were among the first to monetize their personal brands online, how bored teens who began posting selfie videos reinvented fame as we know it, and how young creators on TikTok are leveraging opportunities to opt out of the traditional career pipeline. It's the real social history of the internet. So I really love Taylor and I respect her as a journalist for sure. I will say I have seen some mixed reviews of this book, just in the sense that if you are already really plugged in and really well connected to the social media landscape and what this world kind of entails, that this book might not necessarily surprise you that much. You might not unearth all of these new facts or new stories that you didn't really already know. I read a book 2 years ago, I want to say, called The Influencer Industry, which was just that. It was like the perfect overview and explainer of the influencer industry for anyone who had no idea what it was. So because I really like Taylor's reporting, I would definitely be willing to give this book a chance, but I would say if you're really well connected to social media, like I feel like I am, and as I assume a lot of you are who are listening, just think about whether or not this one will give you some new insights or knowledge. All right, let's get back into some fiction from 2024. So I have heard so many good things about this author, Abby Jimenez, but really about this book, Just for the Summer, that she wrote. And I do also have a book from her that is going to come out in 2025 on this list too. Here's the description for Just for the Summer. Justin has a curse, and thanks to a Reddit thread, it's now all over the internet. Every woman he dates goes on to find their soulmate the second they break up. So when a woman slides into his DMs with the same problem, they come up with a plan. They'll date each other and break up. Their curses will cancel each other's out, and they'll both go on to find the love of their lives. It's a bonkers idea, and it just might work. Emma hadn't planned that her next assignment as a traveling nurse would be in Minnesota, but she and her best friend agree that dating Justin is too good of an opportunity to pass up, especially when they get to rent an adorable cottage on a private island on Lake Minnetonka. It's supposed to be a quick fling, just for the summer. But when Emma's toxic mother shows up and Justin has to assume guardianship of his 3 siblings, they're suddenly navigating a lot more than they ever expected. I love any rom-com or setup like this that kind of gets fueled by social media. I also, in 2024, read In a New York Minute by Kate Spencer, which was a meet cute that happened on the subway that someone filmed that then later went viral and prompted that whole meet cute to kind of continue on even past the point of where the two people ever thought it would go. So if you liked that book, I feel like you would definitely like this one. This one also had a relatively high rating on Goodreads, which I feel like is hard. And can I just say, Goodreads, will you please at some point give us the ability to give something a half star? I feel like that would help clarify a lot of the reviews that I'm seeing. Okay, next up is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I read my first Emily Henry novel this past year called Book Lovers that I really enjoyed. And here is the description for Funny Story. Daphne always loved the way her fiance, Peter, told their story, how they met, fell in love, and moved back to his lakeside hometown to begin their life together. He was really good at telling it, right up until the moment that he realized he was actually in love with his childhood best friend, Petra. Peter loves Petra. I'm just reading that. That might be kind of confusing. Hey, Peter. Hey, Petra. Peter, Petra. It all kind of sounds the same. Okay, sorry. So Peter loves Petra, which is how Daphne begins her new story, stranded in beautiful Waning Bay, Michigan, without friends or family, but with a dream job as a children's librarian that barely pays the bills, and proposing to be roommates with the only person who could possibly understand her predicament, Petra's ex, Miles. The roommates mainly avoid one another until one day, while drowning their sorrows, they form a tenuous friendship and a plan. If said plan involves posting deliberately misleading photos of their summer adventures together, well, who could blame them? Okay, 2 things come to mind with this. First of all, do you guys remember those 2 ABC News anchors who were both having affairs and who left ABC, and then it also came out that their exes were dating? First, that reminds me of that. And then this also reminds me of Justin from Parks and Rec, and this should not be a spoiler because this show has been off the air, or the show wrapped several years ago. But Leslie was dating Justin for a little while on Parks and Rec, and he was always this super interesting guy, and he was such an engaging storyteller, and it took a while for Leslie to realize that he was more interested in there being a good story out there than in who the people involved were and what their feelings were. He would always rather push and get a good story versus find the right outcome for people involved. So I don't know, those 2 things came to mind just from reading this description. Obviously, I read Book Lovers last year and really loved it, so this will be next on my list, and hopefully there will be a shorter wait for this one from the library now that it's been a few months since it came out. Okay, this next one I have heard so many people talk about. Pretty sure my mom has this book, so maybe I'll borrow it from her once I get through some of these other ones that I've borrowed from her. But this one is called The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. It came out in 2024. And the premise of this one is it's a beautiful day in Newport, Rhode Island, when Phoebe Stone arrives at the Grand Cornwall Inn wearing a green dress and gold heels, not a bag in sight, alone. She's immediately mistaken in the lobby for one of the wedding people, but she's actually the only guest at the Cornwall who isn't here for the big event. Phoebe is here because she's dreamed of coming here for years. She hoped to shuck oysters and take sunset sails with her husband, Only now she's here without him at rock bottom and determined to have one last decadent splurge on herself. Meanwhile, the bride has accounted for every detail and every possible disaster the weekend might yield, except for, well, Phoebe and Phoebe's plan, which makes it that much more surprising when the two women can't stop confiding in each other. So clearly a dark kind of plot and setup for this one. And again, maybe skip this book if that is not something you want to sit with right now. It doesn't necessarily sound like the happiest book, but I'm definitely curious about this unexpected friendship and how the weekend all unfolds. I have heard so many people praise and rave about this book, so of course, it is on the TBR. Another that was left over from 2024 is The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. It came out in 2024. When Lauren returns home to her flat in London late one night, she is greeted at the door by her husband, Michael. There's only one problem. She's not married. She's never seen this man before in her life. But according to her friends, her much improved decor, and the photos on her phone, they've been together for years. As Lauren tries to puzzle out how she could be married to someone she can't remember meeting, Michael goes into the attic to change a light bulb and abruptly disappears. In his place, a new man emerges, and a new life, slightly altered, reforms around her. Realizing that her attic is creating an infinite supply of husbands, Lauren confronts the question: if swapping lives is as easy as changing a light bulb, how do you know when you've taken the right path? When do you stop trying to do better and actually start living? Obviously, this one kind of similar to primetime romance. You need to like suspend your disbelief and commit to the world that yes, she has an infinite supply of husbands living in her attic. And yes, these two ate some birthday cake, fell asleep, and now they're in a fictional 2000s TV show. But I'm all here for that because you know why? Sometimes reality can be a little depressing and sometimes we do need an escape. So as long as you're willing to suspend your disbelief and dive fully into this world, I think this could be a great one to add to the TBR. And then another one I wanted to shout out that I was actually sent this past year, which I'm really grateful for. It just became such a busy year that I didn't get around to finishing it. But this is another nonfiction book, and it's called Beyond Vanity by Elizabeth Block. She is an art historian, and in this book, she expands on the nascent field of hair studies by restoring women's hair as a cultural site of meaning in the early United States, with a special focus on the places and spaces in which the hair industry operated. Block argues that the importance of hair has been overlooked due to its ephemerality, as well as misguided association with frivolity and triviality. As Block clarifies, hairdressing was anything but frivolous. So again, this is basically the history of hair in the United States. And this is a nonfiction book that I can absolutely get behind. So I'm super excited to get through this one as well. Also, now that I'm thinking of it, there are two memoirs that came out towards the end of 2024 that I didn't add to this list, but I just wanted to shout out. I do want to read The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. I might even try that one on audiobook just because she narrates it. So I think that would be a good one to potentially listen to through my Spotify Premium. And then the other one was Be Ready When the Luck Happens by Ina Garten. I grew up watching Ina Garten with my mom, and so I just feel like her memoir is one that is filled with some really interesting stories and details that you might not get just from her on camera presence. And next, I want to talk about some books that will be coming out this year in 2025. So to start out, there is a book coming out this month in January called Spiral (parentheses Off the Ice) by Bal Cabra. And a lot of the ones that I mentioned from last year are very like summery romance beach reads that I'm probably going to save for the warmer months. But if you need a cold month romance, listen to this. Elias Westbrook, a newly drafted hockey player for the Toronto Thunder, is facing the challenges of fame and media scrutiny. With a growing fan base and too many expectations on his shoulders, he's struggling to make his first career goal. The tabloids are reporting on his every move, including which woman he was seen with last month, but all he wants to do is escape the spotlight. Enter from stage left Sage Beaumont, an aspiring ballerina with dreams of joining the Aurora Ballet Theater, but her lack of popularity online gives her a major disadvantage when it comes to securing the lead role. When Sage finds herself with the perfect opportunity to make her dreams come true by fake dating Elias, she takes her shot. So this is very Bridgerton season 1. Also, a little bit Go Figure, the Disney Channel original movie. If anyone remembers that, that is a very, very niche reference. But anyway, I just absolutely love the plot of this one. It seems pretty lighthearted, and also, it's a little Taylor Travis coded too. So if you're into any of WAG culture or ice skating or anything along those lines, I think this would be a good one, especially for the winter months. So that one is coming out this month. Next on my 2025 new releases list is First Time Caller by BK Borison, and this one is coming out in February. Aiden Valentine, his last name is Valentine, okay, people? Aiden Valentine has a secret. He's fallen out of love with love. You know what? This book is perfect already. Do I need to keep going? Okay, I will. As the host of Baltimore's Romance Hotline, that's a bit of a problem. But when a young girl calls into the station asking for dating advice for her mom, the interview goes viral, thrusting Aiden and Heartstrings into the limelight. Lucy Stone thought she was doing just fine. She has a good job, an incredible family, and a smart, slightly devious kid. But when all of Baltimore is suddenly scrutinizing her love life, or lack thereof, she begins to question if she is as happy as she believed. Maybe a little more romance wouldn't be such a bad thing. So this is also kind of giving the In a New York Minute plot where that meet cute video went viral, and so now this interview is going viral. I am really interested in seeing more and more authors kind of pick up on these social media trends as the plot points in their storylines, and I also love that there's a little bit of like a radio interview slash podcast adjacent storyline here too. I definitely want to pick this one up, especially for February. Okay, we spoke about Abby Jimenez earlier, so her new book, Say You'll Remember Me, which is also a Taylor Swift lyric, we love that, is coming out in April of 2025. Here's the description for Say You'll Remember Me. There might be no such thing as a perfect guy, but Xavier Rush comes disastrously close. A gorgeous veterinarian giving Greek god vibes, all while cuddling a tiny kitten immediately, yes. That is until Xavier opens his mouth and proves that even sculpted guides can say the absolute wrong thing. Like, really wrong. Of course, there's nothing Samantha loves more than proving an asshole wrong, unless, of course, he can admit that he made a mistake. But after one incredible and seemingly endless date, possibly the best in living history, Samantha is forced to admit the truth, that her family is in crisis and any type of relationship would be impossible. Samantha begs Xavier to forget her, to remember their night together as a perfect moment, as crushing as that may be. Only no amount of distance or time is enough to forget that something is between them. I mean, Greek god veterinarian is just screaming Ted from Schitt's Creek, right? I definitely will try to read Just for the Summer first, and then depending on how I like that, I would definitely either go back into Abby's previous catalog or try to pick this book up as well. Next is a release coming out in May of this year by Hannah Orenstein, who I actually know through the editorial world. I have also read some of Hannah's previous books, including Meant to Be Mine, and I am absolutely so excited for her new book coming out this year, which is called Main Characters. That's Maine with an E, okay? You'll see when I read you the description. Every summer, Vivian Levy and Lucy Webster spend a month with their father at his lake house, separately. Raised in New York City, Vivian is an ambitious sommelier with a secret that could derail her future. Lucy grew up in a tiny Maine town where she now teaches high school English while watching her marriage unravel. They've never met. While Lucy envied her half-sister from afar, their father kept Vivian in the dark. When Vivian arrives at the lake to spread his ashes and sell his cabin, she's shocked to find Lucy there awaiting his return. In an ideal world, they'd help each other through their grief. Instead, forced to spend the summer together, they fight through a storm of suspicion and hostility to untangle the messy truth about their parents' pasts. So it's giving almost like adult Parent Trap, because we've got this sister separation storyline and obviously got a little bit more older adult problems woven in. So I'm super curious to read this one, and especially any book set in Maine over the summer. Just sounds delightful. And on a similar note, still on the theme of lakes and nature, Carly Fortune's new book is coming out in May, and I have read all three of Carly's other books. Her first book, Every Summer After, featured two brothers. We kind of focused more on one brother in the first book, and so this new one, One Golden Summer, is going to follow the story of the other brother. So if you read Carly's first book, definitely add this one to your TBR. And here's a little summary for you. Good things happen at the lake. That's what Alice's grandmother says. And it's true. Alice spent just one summer there at a cottage with Nan when she was 17. It's where she took that photo, the one of three grinning teenagers on a yellow speedboat, the image that changed her life. Now Alice lives behind a lens. As a photographer, she's most comfortable on the sidelines, letting other people shine. Lately, though, she's been itching and hoping for something more. And when Nan falls and breaks her hip, Alice comes up with a plan for them both. Another summer in that magical place, Barry's Bay. But as they settle in, their peace is disrupted by the roar of a familiar yellow boat and the man driving it. Charlie Florek was 19 when Alice took his photo from afar. Now he's all grown up, a shameless flirt who manages to make Nan laugh and Alice long to be 17 again, when life was simpler, when taking pictures was just for fun. Sounds like we've got a little second chance romance on our hands. I am definitely excited to see what comes from this book, and I will also add that Carly's second book, Meet Me at the Lake, is, I believe, being adapted into a TV show by Meghan and Harry's production company. So exciting things for Carly Fortune. Keep your eye on her if you haven't read any of her books yet. Another one that I really want to get my hands on when it comes out is Battle of the Bookstores by Ali Brady, and this one is coming out in June. Despite managing bookstores on the same Boston street, Josie Klein and Ryan Lawson have never interacted much. Josie's store focuses on serious literature, and Ryan sells romance only. But when the owner of both stores decides to combine them, the two are thrust directly into competition. Only one manager will be left standing, decided by who turns the most profit over the summer. Efficient and detail-oriented Josie instantly clashes with easygoing and disoriented Ryan. Oh, sorry, disorganized, not disoriented. He's not falling over while he's selling books. He is just not the most organized person. Their competing events and contrasting styles lead to more than just frustration. The sparks between them just might set the whole store on fire. So, as you can see here, I've got a little bit of an enemies to lovers plotline too, and reading a book where the characters are in a bookstore of any kind, a la Book Lovers, honestly, is just one of my favorite things. Okay, and then this last one might just be my most anticipated book from this year, just because it combines so many different chaotic storylines. So this one is called How to Sell a Romance by Alexa Martin, and it's coming out in July. Emerson Pierce loves everything about being a kindergarten teacher except for the painfully low salary. It isn't until she hears about Petunia Lemon. Do you see where we're going with this? An opportunity to sell makeup products, make some extra money, and meet a group of skincare aficionados that she sees the light at the end of the tunnel. Sure, it sounds a little too good to be true, but what's the worst that could happen? Investigative reporter Lucas Miller didn't always have a chip on his shoulder until his wife joined Petunia Lemon, drained their savings, and filed for divorce. Now he's a little bitter, a lot single, and determined to expose the company. After infiltrating their largest convention yet, the last thing he expects is to lose sight of his mission for one night with a gorgeous woman at the bar. When Emerson and Lucas learn that she's his daughter's teacher, they decide to ignore their scorching chemistry until things with Petunia Lemon turn downright diabolical and Emerson turns to Lucas for help. We've got the forbidden teacher romance, we've got investigative journalism, and we've got an MLM. I need to read this book. I'm so excited. All right, you guys. Well, I hope that has gotten you excited for this year in reading. I would love to hear what your favorite book that you read in 2024 was and what is on your TBR for 2025. Feel free to reach out in all the various ways that you can reach out to me. And thank you again so much for listening to today's episode. As a reminder, you can support Create and Consume for free by doing any of the following. You can leave Apple and Spotify ratings and reviews. You can like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you're watching this episode on YouTube. You can follow along at Create and Consume Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. You could send this episode to a friend who might enjoy it. And as always, don't forget to check out createandconsumepodcast.com for episode recaps and more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.